Hello, it's episode 135 of Grow Yourself Up. Thanks for being here today. And today I'm joined by the wonderful Tamu Thomas. We are going to talk all things overworking, overgiving, why many of us struggle with work and how that pushes us towards burnout. So let me tell you a bit about Tamu first, and then I will tell you a bit about what we chat about. So Tamu Thomas is an author, keynote speaker, and leadership consultant. She helps high-achieving women stop overworking and redefine success so it fuels their ambition without eroding their quality of life. Her work helps leaders create workplaces people want to be part of, where they can do their best work without needing a sabbatical to recover from burnout. With 15 years in social work and expertise in behaviour change, Tamu brings a unique ability to translate complex human dynamics into practical organisational strategy. Her approach is informed by Polyvagal theory and positive psychology, helping organisations build cultures where high performance and well-being coexist. Tamu is known for her work on the biology of belonging, demonstrating how nervous system safety underpins psychological safety, inclusion, and sustainable high performance. She helps leaders understand how culture is experienced in the body and how signals of safety or threat directly shape behavior, retention, innovation, and growth. She has a rare ability to make complex, often uncomfortable topics feel accessible, engaging, and even joyful, blending science, storytelling, and personal insight to connect with diverse audiences. Her talks create shared understanding, making people feel seen and supported, while delivering mindset-shifting insights with warmth, clarity, and practical relevance. She's the author of Women Who Work Too Much, a guide for women ready to stop proving their worth through exhaustion. Her work has been featured in Harper's Bazaar, Stylist, Psychology's Marie Claire, Grazia, and on BBC Sounds. Tamu works with leaders, founders, and organizations to create cultures where performance is sustainable, people feel seen, and success is measured by more than output alone. And for speaking engagements, leadership consulting, and media inquiries, you can contact Tamu at Live360. And all of these .com, and all of these details will be in the show notes. So we had a wonderful conversation, a great conversation, because many of us, because of our nervous system, the way our nervous system was patterned in childhood, and what feels like it keeps us safe, many of us use work to keep ourselves safe and overwork consistently because we think that is where our safety lies. And in addition to that, when we approach a feeling of really like exhaustion, when we're healing from chronic stress and we're approaching burnout again, we pull on more work because work feels like a resource. And this is something that I've really had to unpack in my own life. And there's a big correlation between, so this is very much driven by patriarchal culture. And so it's a systemic issue. And we are much more vulnerable to this when we have not had our needs met in childhood, because the messaging we get in our family hooks right into the patriarchal mainframe. So, I'm really delighted to have Tamu come and share her knowledge and her body of work. And if you haven't got her book, I strongly suggest it, Women Who Work Too Much. Okay, I'm excited for this conversation. Let's dive in so that together we stop glorifying burnout and we redefine our success so that we can feel good in our bodies and just good in our lives. We're allowed that. Okay, let's dive in. Hi, Tamu. Thank you so much for being with me here today. It's delightful to have you. You were my first guest ever, actually.
So, yes, I was. How exciting. Yay.
So it's an honor to have you back because your book wasn't published at that point. And the content of your book is so relevant for me and for all of my listeners because of how we learn to keep ourselves safe at home and how we linked our productivity to our worth, essentially, and our lovability. Mm-hmm. So your fabulous book is called Women Who Work Too Much. And we've both got colours from it on. Can you see? I've got
we have. How serendipitous.
So tell us, because, there's a saying from someone, I can't remember her name, but me search is research. No, research is me search. So tell us about your story about being a woman who worked too much.
Yeah, so I come from, like many of us, excuse me, a very long line of women who work far too much or worked far too much.
Yeah.
So as a child, I grew up seeing women working really hard all the time. And that was my normal. That was within my home. That was my aunties, even the aunties that weren't like biological aunties. They were women in our neighborhood or women who are from the Sierra Leone community. I saw a lot of women working really hard, and I thought that was normal.
Yeah.
And I was very young when there was a bit of a chink in the system. My auntie, who I write about in the book, Auntie Aminata, she was an international businesswoman. I didn't know what that meant, but sometimes she would stay with us in our council flat on the 13th floor on an estate in Ladbroke Grove. But most of the time she stayed in a luxurious flat in Baker Street. So I was born in 1977. So at the time I remember my house was very brown and orange and mustard, like those sorts of colors.
Yeah.
Her house was cream and chrome and gold, and there were chandeliers, and even the carpet was cream. It was a totally different world from what I was used to. And people used to talk about her a lot. And you could tell that she was somebody, I didn't know what this meant, but the way they talked about her, she was somebody that had status. She was somebody important, but she was also somebody that both men and women talked about in a way where I could sense there was a bit of intimidation, because she was a woman who lived on her own terms. And unlike the women I grew up with all the time, who were really jolly when there was a party or some kind of celebration, generally speaking, they were not jolly. They were living under strain, and it was very vivid. Even when they tried to conceal it, you could sense it. But Auntie Aminata had a radiance about her that these other... So basically, it's like these women were 2D and Auntie Aminata was 3D and luminescent. She always smelled of like poison, perfume, or Rive Gauche. She had her hair in the bounciest, juiciest jerry curls that would be like really nicely styled. She wore a suit. She had a handbag that looked really fancy to me. And she just looked like joy in comparison to what I was seeing all the time. So that alerted me to the fact that what I was seeing didn't have to be normal. And I looked at her and I thought, I don't know what an international businesswoman is. And I was about 6 years old because my brother wasn't born yet. And I thought, I want to be like her, like this. I want to be like her.
Yeah. And from a nervous system point of view, when you said the strain of all the people, all the women around you working, you would have really picked up on that strain in your own nervous system and kind of thought that was normal. Because I think the beginnings of habituating ourselves to chronic stress are that kind of environment where we think we always have to be on.
Yeah.
And there's a high degree of, because it's interesting the way you said she emanates joy. Like, I wonder if she was more in ventral because she was safer.
Oh, she was totally ventral. Not only was she ventral, because she's very charismatic, she's also a super co-regulator. So Stephen Porges talks about people who are super co-regulators. She was a super co-regulator. And what I know now through the lens of polyvagal theory is that a lot of the women I grew up around, they were super co-dysregulators because they were dysregulated. But what I saw with that dysregulated state is that the trade-off was quote unquote worth it, because these women were very much in the top of their sympathetic nervous system, the survival branch.
Yeah.
And they were fighting and flighting their way out of social housing into mortgaged houses, often with a driveway. They were fighting or flighting their way despite the huge amounts of discrimination they were facing, because most of the women I'm talking about are Black African women, Black Caribbean women, or women who are immigrants to the UK. So maybe they were Eastern European with a very strong accent or something. So these women were fighting or flighting their way into success despite what was going on. And one of the commonalities among all of these women to be quite honest, were that their men were not as driven as they were. So they had to be driven for the both of them. But at the same time, because of our patriarchal conditioning, and let's face it, it was the 80s, women weren't as liberated as they are now. They were playing the game at home and at work of making these massive strides, but still playing small so as not to intimidate their colleagues, not to intimidate their boss. Making all of these strides, being the main breadwinner in the household, but playing small so as not to intimidate their husband. So what I was seeing is that there were massive gains, but those gains cost a lot and required lots of hustle and strain. So like I would joke and say in the Sierra Leonean community, people eat PhDs for breakfast. I remember a point in time, my mum studying at South Bank University, working in this building across the road from where we lived, running the household, doing everything. And my dad like just had a job. Like he went out and earned money, but my mum went out and earned money. She went out and got like further education and she did all the stuff. So the trade-off, in some ways, the trade-off was great because it meant rather than holidays that were just not really holidays because it was going back home invariably to sort out stuff. We were going to like France or Spain, which may not sound as tropical or as adventurous to a trip to Sierra Leone, but it was a pure holiday. But the trade-off was huge. So I learned that progress cost your energy, your resources, your time, your joy, and you were literally left with the dregs, with the scraps of your life.
Yeah. And that's that gendered piece that you talked about, that you alluded to, is so important, that the woman has to be the literal superhero and do everything at home.
But you cannot own that you're the superhero.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have to disavow that somehow.
There was lots of talk. I remember a conversation that another one of my aunts, who is a gangster, not as in a criminal way, my auntie Nima, who is, she's all kinds of wonderful. But I remember a conversation where this woman who was studying for a PhD at Guildford University was talking about behind every great man is a great woman.
Oh, my God.
And all of these conversations about children should be seen and not heard. And those conversations were celebrated. And I just had a very strong sense that this was wrong.
Yeah. So how did you kind of extract yourself from that in some sense? Because when we have, like, if we think about now, I'm 76, so I'm 1 year older than you, I think. But of our generation and a little bit above us and below us, women are literally exhausted from doing this, from working outside the home, from doing most of the labor inside the home, and from trying not to upset this power balance, which is often based on gendered things about like, I must be a bit smaller than you so that you can feel like a big man. How did you kind of escape that?
I don't think I really did escape it until, so I think I subconsciously escaped it. So it wasn't empowered. It was a reaction to, and I didn't consciously know what was going on. It became more and more conscious every year after I turned 38. So I think that 38 is a huge threshold for most women. Maybe it's because 40's on the horizon, maybe it's something biological, I don't know. But what I've witnessed in the work I've done, when I talk about 38, women's eyes light up and they're like, oh my goodness, yes, they recognize that that's a threshold. But prior to that, I was kind of living in reaction to, so a very fear-based nervous system reaction to. So it was very much about, I don't want to be like that, so I'm not going to do that. Part of that was leaving home at 17. I could not stay living in a house where I saw my mum giving away her power, her majesty, her charisma. My mum is just one of the best human beings. You saw her because you came to my, yes. So she's just magnanimous. And I could see that. And I just thought, you're giving it away to a man.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought, I need to be out of there. So I left home at 17, and I was never, like, I had boyfriends. I was interested in boys, but not in the same way my friends were. I didn't understand boys and men. All I saw was relationship after relationship where women were suppressing what made them wonderful in order to be with a man that just wasn't aligned with them. So I never really had long-term relationships. The moment I witnessed something that I felt was trying to make me shrink, I was out of there. And my friends would be like, there's no such thing as perfection. And I mustn't be so picky, and I'll keep picking. And then one day I'm just going to pick random shit, like all sorts of stuff. I was very I was very ambitious, and I was very keen to be successful within work. So I feel like all the stuff I didn't understand about romantic relationships, particularly male-female relationships, got channeled into work and being productive in that way. So whilst toxic levels of productivity were very harmful, they were also a place of solace. I could guarantee what was going to happen, whether it was a quick failure or a quick win.
There was control.
Sorry, go on.
Much more control.
Way more control. And unlike men and other human beings to a lesser or greater degree, it felt like I was being loved back or rejected. So I knew where I needed to pivot towards really quickly. So if I wasn't getting success at that thing, whilst I would do all the things we do, you're no good, all that kind of stuff, you're not enough, you should have tried hard. Because I'm so driven, I would then divert, okay, I'm going to try something else. So people would say things like, I don't stick to one thing. If I can feel it's not going anywhere, I'm going to pivot to the next thing. Like, I don't believe in staying somewhere in this kind of like sunk cost fallacy. I've put so much time in this, I've got to stay. One of the things I know and learned in a very profound way last year is that when it's time for me to move, I've got to move. I can't wait. I can't wait for it to make sense. I've just got to go. So, yeah. So
tell us, let's go back to what you said about the 38-year-old pivot so you were kind of very driven and working a lot.
Yes.
What led you to notice that this actually needed to be unwound?
I was ill all the time. It literally felt like I was dragging myself through life. There was no energy, there was no zest. I had to really, because I'm very resilient and I'm very resourceful and I'm generally an optimistic person, I was able to strategize my way out of complete and utter exhaustion, grief, all the rest of it. I was able to strategize my way out. And I just couldn't do it anymore.
So do you think you kept yourself in your head, like strategizing? Like,
oh, yeah.
You think you were just completely cut off at the neck down?
Totally cut off. Neck down, totally cut off. No connection with my body whatsoever. So the warning signs I was getting progressively from 2009, I was able to shut down, suppress by any means necessary. And I was 38 in 2015. And I just started to experience illness that I wasn't getting over. And
that was when you were still a social worker?
I was still a social worker. So I was still a social worker, but I always had some kind of side hustle. So in 2015, I was winding down. I had a fashion side hustle where I would use textiles, African textiles, waxed cotton, heritage woven cloth to make fashionable clothes that we would wear in the UK. And it had lots of kind of affirmation success, but it wasn't commercially viable. And so I wound that down. And something I wanted to do from 2010 was to have a platform for Black British mothers, because in 2010, I can't remember what I was doing, but I was looking at about something to do with Black motherhood. And when I Googled it, there were pictures of apes, gorillas, and all this stuff about welfare queens, Black women being on welfare. And I was like, what the heck? And I'm one of these people, because I'm a doer, I was like, I want to do something about this.
Yeah.
And then coincidentally, mothers' meetings reached out to me and asked me to contribute to something. And I thought, well, I can't do it now because they're going to think I'm copying. Everybody's going to think I'm copying. So I didn't do it. But it kept coming up over and over and over and over and over again. So in 2015, as I was winding down the clothing stuff, I started the background work to create an online platform for Black British mothers called Motherhood Reconstructed. So that distracted me from how barren I felt on the inside.
Yes.
So,
and wait. I have to touch on this so much because this is how we use work as a resource. I have done this repeatedly.
It's the best numbing tool.
Sorry?
It's the best numbing tool.
Yeah. I'm going to do, like, I'm so stressed and everything is breaking down, and I'm going to launch a new project over here and do some more work.
Finger looking good. That's my favorite strategy. My favorite. Doing too much work, I'm going to find some more.
Yes. And I think that happens for a lot of people in maternity leave, actually, in early motherhood, when lots of people think it's a good idea to launch a new venture. And bless bless all of us, because this is, it does seem like such a resource, and it's a really effective accommodation. So we'll keep on doing that until we have enough regulation in our system.
Absolutely.
Because I don't want to shame either me or you or anyone, because this is such a big thing.
Oh, it is. And that's why I am always talking about resilience is not the flex we think it is.
Exactly.
Because resilience, I know that there are now various meanings, but fundamentally, resilience is our ability to bounce back from adversity.
Yeah.
And when you're able to do that, you will just keep bouncing back and bouncing back and bouncing back. Bouncing back from adversity is a survival strategy. In my book, I've got a diagram, which is called 360 system care. And after resilience, there is, I've forgotten what it's called. I've forgotten what I put after
Which
resilience.
Page is it on? Do you know? I've got it here.
I haven't got a clue what page it's on.
Okay.
But after resilience, there is spaciousness. And if we can allow ourselves to indulge in that spaciousness, we will then be able to expand. But when we're just bouncing back, we're keeping ourselves in a survival state. So we think it's good, but we never get into a place of thriving. We're constantly surviving.
Yes.
And so we just keep strategizing our way into survival, but we get lots of rewards for it.
And that's the really tricky bit, because I think it's so because what we were talking about disconnection and being cut off from the neck down, to some extent, we really have to be forced into our body. So we're confronted with the really real repercussions for our bodies and everything, and actually notice, because often spaciousness feels deeply uncomfortable and actually quite threatening to have spaciousness.
Absolutely.
How did you make that sort of transition around, okay, I'm going to actually try and go into my body a bit. I'm going to allow a different reality to take root.
I was shoved in. It wasn't a choice. It wasn't a choice. And I'm grateful for it, because if I wasn't, I would still be doing what I was doing now. So in the introduction of my book, I talk about a day, I think it might have been in 2016. I think it was in 2017 when I was on my way to court.
You were on the
and
tube,
I had a panic attack.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it was a panic attack. And I had been having smaller panic attacks. So when I spoke to a psychologist about it, she said that it sounds like what I was having before were anxiety attacks. And then my body had to take me to a panic attack because I wasn't listening to the warning sign of low mood, the warning sign of anxiety, the warning sign of anxiety attacks. So I had a panic attack that was so huge, I thought I was dying. But still, because I'm resilient and I'm resourceful, I was able to remember what I would do with children. Something you can hear, see, taste, touch, smell, to bring me back into my body so that I could go to court, give expert evidence, be commended by the judge, be thanked by the barrister, be scowled at by the parents who I wasn't agreeing with. But I knew something was very wrong, and I went to my GP. They referred me to psychotherapy, and also we did a range of blood tests. And when we did the range of blood tests, there were like various things that were going on biologically. And my doctor wanted to prescribe antidepressants and antidepressants and anxiety medication. And I thought, no, I don't want that. Not because I think there's anything wrong with it. And it's not because I felt I was above it. There was something within me that said, this is something that is very primal and spiritual. It's not about medication. Everything needs to change. So a friend of mine, Lanice Brothers, who wrote the book, You Can Have a Better Period, and she's on Instagram as Eat, Love, Move. She is a nutritionist. She's the first nutritionist I had come across that I understood. And it didn't sound like it was airy-fairy stuff that was for people who had lots of money to spend and lots of time available. And I discussed my blood tests with her, and she explained how everything was coming together to create a layer cake of dysfunction and dis-ease because I needed to change how I live. And the doctors were basically implying that it was all psychological. But when I spoke to Lanice, I understood, especially coming from a social work background, I understood the symbiotic relationship between my mind and my body and what was going on.
And you need a biopsychosocial model, you know what I mean, to really understand ourselves.
And as a social worker, I was trained in systems theory. And I just knew that there was something systemic going on. And then as I began to talk about it with myself, so because that my head is the first place I go to, I leaned into journaling. And that really helped me to begin to identify patterns and things that were going on. It helped me to understand things that were precipitating factors to my behaviors, and people, environments who were precipitating factors, and the relationships between us and what that brought out within that relationship. And I just noticed every woman in my life, whether they were directly in my life or it was via something like television or social media, was experiencing some version of what I was experiencing. So thinking about that systems theory lens, I thought, well, this is something systemic. There is something going on that is creating an environment where all of us are playing small, working too much, and living up to this idea of success that is like eating Haribo when you need a home-cooked meal. So it helped me not blame myself and make myself the bad person. It was something that was wider. And I met with a friend of mine who is a psychodynamic counselor. And she said, oh, what you're talking about sounds existential. I was like, thank God, I've got a name for this thing. I'm experiencing something. I hadn't even heard of the term existential crisis, but that gave me something. And it told me I needed to get to know myself. And as I started to say that to myself, I started to feel sensations in my body and have these experiences that reminded me of when I worked with children who were detached from their felt sense. And I would do things like say, well, what happens when your tummy feels wobbly, or when your tummy feels like butterflies, or lay your hand on your heart and tell me how that feels, etc. So I started to use those strategies I use with children for myself. And what I experienced was grief, rage like you wouldn't believe, and neglect. I experienced how much I had neglected myself because I had also been neglected by parents who were stuck in and I don't mean like gross neglect.
Yeah, they were feeding you and you had clothes. You mean emotional stuff.
I mean, yeah. So recently in the UK, well, all over the world, the program Adolescence has been on Netflix and lots of people are talking about it. And what we witnessed was a child whose parents, definitely the father, but I think the mother as well, was so wrapped up in being a provider, making sure the children had what they need in terms of material goods, that the emotional parenting the child needed, not the emotional parenting the parents thought the child needed, but the emotional parenting the child needed was absent. And that void was filled by what is being called red pill content. My void was filled by work hard, get good results, be successful, blah, 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 blah. So that became very apparent for me.
And I think what you said about neglect, we are a neglected society, and in our
100%.
generation, we are trying to break that cycle of neglect. But mainstream parenting practices that the triumvirate that you talk about, the white supremacy, capitalism, and patriarchy, they have perpetuated those. They've taught us first of all that the way we should parent should be neglectful, because children should be seen and not heard. We shouldn't spoil them. We shouldn't hold them too much. All of that. But so all the mainstream parenting advice has actually been neglect your child, because otherwise you're going to spoil them.
Naughty step, sleep training, all of that, banishing your children.
It's all basically breaking connection. And then we wonder, because that's kind of essentially why patriarchy persists, because we're all so disconnected. And so I haven't watched that program, but I just feel strongly that it's about neglect, but that even though the neglect is perpetuated in the families individually, it's also actually a systemic issue.
So it starts as a systemic issue. That system informs culture. Culture informs local community, whatever that looks like for you. Local community then informs, like all of it informs parenting. So we're just mini versions of what the government is doing. So it's not, listen, by no means am I blaming my parents. I also understand the parenting they received. My parents are from Sierra Leone, which is a former British colony. The style of parenting that came along during those times, Victorian times and whatever else, it was very Dickensian.
Yes.
But that is how we were told, spare the rod, spoil the child, and all of those sorts of things. That is what we were taught was the way to be. That is how we raise children who are obedient.
Yeah.
There was something they were talking about. And
I think actually in Africa, the British, in some ways, we have adopted more of the Britishness.
Absolutely. And we had to for survival.
Yeah.
Because we wanted them to look after us, to revere us. And all of that was, to be good, to assimilate. So in my book, I talk about the trinity of oppression, which is capitalism, patriarchy, white supremacy. And when they come together, they create a system of dominance. They create a system of division and disconnection. That is how they thrive. And those systems, they work hand in hand. They're not then as separate entities. They're not as strong. They come together to create a unified force. And when I talk about it, I want to be very, very clear. I'm not talking about calling individual white people racist. I'm talking about a system of oppression that doesn't even benefit white people. The benefits white people gain, you have to continuously coerce and dominate in order to maintain that hierarchy.
Yeah.
But when we tune into who we are at our core, who we are in our nature, that trinity of oppression becomes a trinity of expression. So the opposite of oppression is expression. We're allowed to express ourselves. Rather than a system of dominance, we have a system of collaboration. Rather than a system of division, we have a system of connection. Rather than having a system of, being disconnected, we are creative.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
And a system that relies on our exploitation cannot continue if we are being creative, if we are being collaborative, if we are being connected. We can see in our world what's going on. Social media, for all the things we complain about, it has created the types of creativity, of collaboration and connection that has really been shaking the foundations of those systems of oppression. So now it's trying to double down, to lock us down and take us to this time of before, making things great again, returning to traditional values, returning to, whereas when we're living in a society that recognizes that when we expand, we all expand and benefit, rather than harking back to a time of old, we're now focused on and committed to creating a future that is more spacious for all of us, because we recognize it's not a zero-sum game.
Yeah, exactly.
And when I realized that my obsessive compulsive need to be productive was actually becoming a zero-sum game that was taking away from other elements of my life, I thought to myself, I need to redefine. I didn't have the words in my mind, but I knew I had to redefine success. Success could not be about how many things are ticked off on the list. Success could not purely be about the money that was coming into my bank account. It was about, how are these things supporting me to live a good life? Because what dawned on me is that, oh, actually, none of us are working to enhance how we live. We're living to work. And I thought, my goodness, most of us start school when we're 4 years old. So I think it's way before we're even born that this conditioning begins through epigenetics.
Yeah.
But absolutely all of us, from the moment we end school at 4 years old, for most of us, we are taught, you get rewarded if you can suppress your needs, be convenient, live up to somebody else's standards, and sit still all day.
Yeah.
Abandon yourself. The more you can abandon yourself, the more good you are.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And it's no surprise that the CEOs of all of the big companies and everything, I can't imagine. I mean, there's so much complex trauma, because the people who can best abandon themselves are the people who have learned to abandon themselves best at home, you know, in terms of suppressing their needs. And I love what you, because as we talked about previously, your book is all about redefining success for ourselves and focusing on what our life feels like, instead of using that endless metric of, what do those people over there think about my life? Do they think I'm successful?
Yeah.
But that is such a complicated thing to unhook from. Like, how have you, and there's lots of lovely exercises in the book to help with that, like so many different joy practices. And I love that one where you said, send yourself an email like a year later. You know, that's really lovely. But how have you facilitated that, actually redefining success for you and noticing, like using that thing about, how do I feel? Like, I don't want to feel burnt out all the time, and I want to have some joy, and I want to have lovely relationships. Has that been a lot on your nervous system work? Like, what has been most helpful for you?
It has been a combination of things. So the nervous system work, and actually getting to know how I feel and what actually makes my life feel good, what actually makes the soles of my feet and the backs of my calves tingle, how it feels to end the day and feel complete. Doing the nervous system work and understanding how it feels to be in that ventral place of safety and connection and social engagement, in comparison to the place of, like, my motor going, I've got to. It really helped me. And it helped me distinguish between what felt like chasing a target that was always out of reach and actually being satiated by my life. So I was able to focus on, well, what are the things that make me feel good and make life feel worth living? And so I would joke all the time about, I think I've been tired since year 11. So I'm saying, I think I've been tired since I was 15 years old.
Yeah.
Possibly before that.
32 years or something.
Exactly. That's not normal. So thinking about living to work, working to live, I thought, right, work is part of my self-care. Work is one of the ways I create an income, because everything we need to be well in our society requires money.
Yeah.
And people say love doesn't cost a thing. You try loving when you don't know how you're paying for your bills at the end of the month. Is very, very difficult. So everything in our lives. And also I thought to myself, well, success can't just be about the money that comes in. It needs to be about making life feel good. And bearing in mind, I was joking about being tired since year 11. I thought, well, actually, success needs to mean, for me, that I feel well rested.
Yeah.
Because when I feel well rested, I am much more willing to take the risk, in Dead Dana's words, of truly living. When I am truly rested, so you talked earlier on about it requiring bravery. It absolutely does. And when I'm well rested, I can tell the difference between bravery and bravado. And what I recognized is I was living with a lot of bravado because it was a survival and protective mechanism. So I'm walking around life like
With
a cat
fear
on a hot tin
underneath.
roof. Yeah, literally. So then I started to think, well, everything I have done in a manner that isn't just I've done it really well and I have had affirmation and external validation, that I've actually felt really satisfied with it. It has always been from a place where I'm experiencing safety, connection. And I don't mean safety, there's no risk, but I feel safe within myself so I can take those risks.
Yeah.
When I think about anything that feels like, oh my goodness, this almost feels like a miracle, whether it was in my personal life or professional life, it has always come from that rested place where it feels like my brain is relaxed enough for some kind of divine inspiration to bubble up to the surface. And I'm then able to make it real. So I just recognized all of the hustle, go, 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 push. All it did was create more hustle and more push. Whereas the things in my life that actually became a resource and helped me to expand didn't come from that energy at all. And what I recognized is that I had to learn to trust that because that supported me way more than the other stuff. And I started to notice that as I leaned into that more, people who were still existing in that chaotic dysfunction started to, what felt like to me, to reject me because I was no longer subscribing to the subconscious contract we had made with each other.
Yeah.
So they were recognizing me, they were seeing me, but the mirror neurons were different. Our kind of nervous system co-dysregulation had disappeared, and that was unsettling for them because I've changed, but they don't understand what's going on. And quite frankly, neither did I. But what I knew was that I could not risk going back to a place in time where I was having panic attacks, where I was having colds for 6 months of the year, where my inner dialogue and my inner negotiations were so harmful and cruel, it was impacting the way I experienced myself and lived. And what became very, very clear to me is that I could not prioritize maintaining, like I kept saying, life is too short to feel like a pair of too tight, skinny jeans. I could not continue to squeeze into jeans I had outgrown in order to be in relationship with people that didn't see me. And simultaneously, I didn't understand it, but I knew that I needed to create relationships that just knew this version of me. So they didn't have to adjust to my changes or any of that. They could see me as I am right now. And the more I spent time with these people, the more I started to recognize myself as I was and recognize that long-standing relationships had to change. And if they couldn't change, then they would end. But by me actually going out and seeking those relationships, I realized that there was no limit to be able to make meaningful, soulful relationships, and that keeping stuck in relationships I had outgrown, not only was it harmful for me, it was also harmful for the other person I was in relationship with. And it's not just about people, it's also our work. For most of us, work is the longest relationship we'll ever have.
Yes.
And whilst I knew that it would be a risk leaving employment for starting my own business, I also knew that it would be a bigger risk to stay and not try something new. So I was in a space where it was too risky in all ways for things to remain the same.
Yeah. And how did you, so you transitioned into your own business and to your own coaching practice and to being an author and all these different things as a speaker. How, and now you talk a lot about how to have a spacious life, to have enough space to cultivate joy, to have meaningful, authentic relationships. How do you step away? Because one of the hooks I think that a lot of us collapse into then is, so we might have managed to just find success according to how we feel, basically, like like, for example, I think, okay, I'm not going to overschedule myself. That was one of the biggest changes I made, because in COVID, I scheduled things everywhere, all of the time, at night, Saturday morning, sure, I'll see you then, like all of this randomness. And then I had to kind of shrink it back. And, but then I can easily go into comparison with, like, why don't I do this? Why am I not running this? Why am I not doing this? And I have to come back to my own truth and go, okay, I'm not running something like that, because that would finish me off too much. And I don't have I want to actually be present for my children in some way. So I'm not going to do that. But how do you, and I have worked really hard on not comparing and coming back to my own truth with the idea that, I can only see someone else's externals. Like, I don't know what the inside of their life feels like. I can only judge me by the inside of my life. And what you said about life being short, like, it really is short. Like, I don't want to spend my children's whole childhood with me, like, chasing something, But anyway, be that as it may, how have you helped yourself with stepping away from comparison?
Well, I love words. And when I get hooked on a word, I'm like, in the thesaurus and looking at the, origins of the word and all of this stuff. And when I started reading about comparison, I thought, I don't think I'm comparing, actually. And I think for a lot of women, this is my hypothesis. I don't have any facts on this, but in my experience, what we're not comparing is envy. So what I know to be true is that when I think I'm comparing myself to somebody, like they're doing all of this great stuff, I should be, why aren't I? No, actually, what is going on is I'm seeing characteristics they own, and they own it. And what I am doing is comparing myself to them owning their characteristics. So it might not be that, I don't know, somebody has a great business idea and they just go off and do it. My comparison, I'll be like, well, why are they doing that? They haven't gone and got all the qualifications to be able to do that. Why do they think they can just get up and do that? What I'm experiencing, what I'm envying, is them believing in and backing themselves.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
So when I had those experiences, I now know myself. And this is why, patriarchy, capitalism, white supremacy doesn't want us to know ourselves intimately, because when we do, we will make powerful choices and we will own powerful truths. Me getting to know myself intimately, when comparison, in inverted commas, rears its head, what I know is that I'm envious that they are owning a part of myself, owning a part of themselves that I'm not owning for myself. So when I see that behavior, my question is, what are they owning that I've shoved into the shadows? And it is now they're now projecting it back to me in 3D, and I can't handle it because I've made that thing a shadow. How can I bring more of that into my life? Because quite frankly, Cath, in my world, there are a lot of women who are striving to get to seven figures, have a 7-figure business. There are lots of people I know who are turning over in their business 500,000, 750,000. I do not give a damn about any of that. I have calculated, because I've got to know myself intimately, and I know, or, in theory, I know what I need in order for me to feel like a well-rested woman. I know what that figure is. I am not chasing a 7-figure business. What I see, my peers, and I've got so much respect and admiration for them. These are women I have really got a lot of time for. But what I see them doing in order to create this 7-figure business, that doesn't turn me on at all. That is not something that is going to take me closer to rest. It's actually going to take me further and further away. So I don't get jealous about those sorts of things, because listen, I've got a pink chair over there that I sit in and look outside the window and stare at the clouds. I know myself. I'm not doing all of the stuff they're doing, because now they've got a whole load of responsibility in order to make that. I want freedom. I want to be able to have white space in my calendar so that I think, it's a lovely day today. like at the moment, I'm on Cath watch. So I live near a dairy farm and it's also a public walkway so we can walk through. So as often as I'm walking through there because between now and April, that's when
Lots
we
of
start
baby
to
cows
see
will
the
be
new
born.
yeah, we see them in the fields. I want freedom to do that. I don't want, great, I've got white space, so I'm going to go on a walk because I know the walk helps me get my best ideas. So I'm going to be able to create a product so I can sell this thing and make more. I don't want that. Like when I see these adverts on social media, sign up to this program so you can create a funnel that generates clients on demand. I don't want clients on demand. I don't want that. I want freedom. I want to work in a way that enables me to express myself and enjoy my life. Like anything that feels like a shackle, I don't want it. Because for me, the trade-off isn't worth it. Because whilst life is too short, it's too short and simultaneously far too long for me to be living in a life where it's growth for the sake of growth, work for the sake of work. Work, for me, is about me living a good life.
Yes.
I don't need all of this stuff in order for me to do that.
Absolutely. And I love what you said about envy. So I love envy in a way because it shows me when someone has got something that I want, and then I can either, one of my therapists, when I was really struggling to meet someone, and I was envious of the flatmate that I lived with at the time, she was like, why? She was like, yes, you understand why I'm envious, but she was like, find out what she did. Like, try and embody some of that energy, notice what was going on. Ask for tips, like really be honest about, I want that too. Can you help me with how you got that, basically?
Yes.
But I feel that because when I compare myself, what I forget to do is what you've just done. I forget to think that doesn't turn me on. So for me, I'm separating out comparison and envy, that we actually have to kind of keep on going back to our own truths, like really go back to first principles about what do you want your life to look like? Because I also don't want to have, I beat myself up with thinking, why don't I have all these big programs or whatever? But I don't want to have that responsibility at this point in my life. Maybe I will change my mind in the future, but I have to really be very disciplined with myself in terms of not getting stuck in that like beating up myself place, to really come back to what you said about how you want your life to feel, and you want to be able to go and see the baby cows.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go and see the daffodils. I want to put my feet on the grass, and I need some space in my diary to put my feet on the grass. I love that what you said. And I also think that talking about envy in a way that is not shameful is really important.
It's so human.
Yeah, it's so human, exactly. Okay, now I want to read something. I'm conscious of our time. And with all of this, so we've talked about these broad themes of redefining success, of not comparing. With all of this, we need authentic, loving relationships with people who can really see us and hold us. And it's really difficult to create those often, especially in our adult lives. If we've often people have like a friendship cull, not intentionally, but like people fall away and blah, 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 things happen. And we have to then, find people to be friends with in our adult lives. And that can be an awkward process. And in your book, you talk about how authentic relationships are regenerative. And you also talk about how it is to find time. Can I read you a passage from the book? And then we can talk about it a bit. Okay, so this is on page 188 of the book. And you say, I have often found myself calculating whether or not the 2 hours at dinner, it's always dinner, are going to be worth prepping dinner for my daughter, getting dressed, putting on makeup, power walking to the tube, 2 hours travel there and back, the best part of £100 and still coming home hungry. The awkwardness of pointing out that I don't drink alcohol when the bill comes and thinking about how tired I'm going to be tomorrow. I know I sound like Scrooge, but when working makes time so finite, even enjoyment can feel like a chore. Mm-hmm. And I felt that that's such a beautiful passage in so many ways, and especially for mothers. That complexity of how can we get our own needs met, and how can we get our own needs met for connection, and how can we combat loneliness? Because otherwise so many of us often are now working from home, and we don't commute into an office, and that's for many different reasons. But it's easy to give lip service to wanting to have these relationships, but we actually have to put our money where our mouth is and do the investment in it. And I think you've captured it so well there around how it's very complex actually on a day-to-day basis to do it. How do you kind of help yourself with that?
I had to take a stand and tell myself it's only as complex as I'm making it. So before I did believe it was really complex, and now and it's not bypassing, I refuse to indulge the idea that it is complex. So in 2015, when I was starting my platform, I knew that I wanted company. I wanted to be able to collaborate with somebody. So I asked my friend Leah if she would do it with me. So I went out and sought, and I'm quite a loner. Like, I really like solitude, and sometimes I can take it far too far. But I went out and sought that. I took the risk of her saying no, she's not interested. And it turned out to be something really beautiful. I've taken the risk previously and it has turned out not to be beautiful, but that is life sometimes. You win some, you lose some. It doesn't mean that you need to write things off. And then I'd had that experience and I was able to make some wonderful friendships. And so I kept doing it. There was somebody who we had been in a program together, then she was in my program. And I was like, please God, I don't want her to renew and continue in the program because I want to be her friend. And I thought, sod it, I'm telling her, please don't renew in the program because I want us to explore being friends. And she's like, oh my God, I would love to be your friend. And so that's how it started. There was we think we're the only ones. Like, who do we think we are that we think we're the only ones who are lonely? Who do we think we are that we're the only ones that think that making new friends is awkward? If we feel like that, it's very likely that there are others that do as well.
Yeah.
So we need to take the risk and reach out and do that. So I reached out, and that person now is one of my wonderful friends. Secondly, my people, I wrote this book, Women Who Work Too Much, for me. As much as I wrote it for other people, I am still grappling with parts of myself that default right into toxic productivity.
Yeah.
I say that I am a toxic productivity junkie in recovery. When you know anything about addiction, you are in recovery for your entire life. You're not just over it. It's something that I'll be working on continuously. I worked far too much to be able to get this book out into the world. Then when the book was published, I had to work far too much to promote the book, etc. So it's part of life. It's about managing that and not making it a permanent way of being.
Yeah.
And so I look at, okay, so a lot of my friends are self-employed and we've got stuff to do, but we also want to see each other. So now every month, there's one of my friends who every month we co-work together. We go co-working together. So we're both doing what needs to be done and we're getting our needs met and we can have little chats and we have lunch together. So that is something I do. Set honest goals. Sometimes we feel like if it can't be whatever we've been conditioned to believe regular or consistent is, it's not worth it. Two of my oldest friends, I've known them since one of them since junior school, one of them since secondary school. We decided we're going to meet once a quarter. It would be lovely to say, let's make it a monthly thing, but the quarter comes round really quickly.
Yes.
So we have agreed we're going to see each other once a quarter. We met the weekend before last, and I said, can we do an activity next time so we're not just catching up over lunch, brunch, dinner, whatever it is, so that we're actually doing something together, because that's what formed our friendship in the first place. We used to do things together. Obviously, we were children, but we can still bring elements of that into our lives.
Play.
Exactly. So it's about, we can pathologize ourselves. We can be doing all of this happened on 2021 and blah, 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 blah. Or we can just say, do you know what? So what? You've heard me say that before. So what? Now is now. This is what I want. This is what I'm going to do. Anybody who is listening, watching, or engaging with this in some way, shape, or form, and I'm looking into the camera, if this is going to be on video, if you are feeling lonely, if you are feeling isolated, I encourage you to reach out to somebody and say, I want to expand my network. I really want to be conscious about the connections I'm making and invite them somewhere. It doesn't have to be something that's going to last forever. Just like when we go on a first date with somebody, we don't automatically, well, some people do, but generally speaking, we don't automatically assume we're going to marry that person. Give yourself the chance of experimenting with new people so that you can see who feels like a right fit and then work out how you can expand that relationship. The person I just mentioned, who I reached out to and said, please don't be in my program, I want us to be friends. She doesn't live in this country. We meet via Zoom. We voice note each other. And when she comes to the UK annually, we do our best to meet up. If we can't, we can't. The next time I want to be able to go and visit her where she lives. We need to give ourselves a chance. We need to stop writing ourselves off because we want to do things perfectly. Because subconsciously, there's a lot of perfection in, well, I need to do it in this particular way for it to be meaningful. No, we don't. We just need to do the thing. I think that if we treated our connections like experiments, we're experimenting to see what sticks. We will take the risk of expanding and meeting new people. And literally, if it's the co-working thing, so be it. If you're in the UK, this isn't sponsored or anything like this. I did some work for Santander Bank recently, and they were telling me about these work cafes they've got. I thought they just had a work cafe at their head office in Milton Keynes. They've got work cafes in various locations in London, so Google them. They are free to use. The Wi-Fi is good. They've got decent desks and chairs, and you can get coffees and whatnot in there.
They're amazing. Wow.
They are amazing. And arrange co-working dates with people because...
And you don't have to work at Santander. You just can go.
You can just go. It's free. Totally
That's amazing.
Free.
Wow.
Yeah. So check that out. So you're the part of you that's like, oh my gosh, I've got so much work to do. That part of you that's that sympathetic driver, that need is being met. And your need for connection is being met. And Cath, you know and I know that when sympathetic is combined with ventral, we have play.
Yeah.
Right? Exactly. So that workday now becomes playtime. And be honest, like my workday, I don't start my workday before 10 a.m. So when I'm meeting people, the arrangement is that we meet each other between 10 and 10:30, and then invariably, because I'm in a place in my life where a lot of the people I'm friends with, their children are younger than mine, they need to go off and do the school run. Fine. Then I have a bit of time where I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But we need to be creative, you know? Oppressive systems want us to think in a scarcity way.
Yeah.
But when we think, no, I'm actually going to be my own system of expression and I'm going to be creative, how can we be creative? You can do, if you're able to do 10 till 2, that's 4 hours. Neuroscience shows us that we work really well in 90-minute spurts. So if you give yourself, you and your friend, you have a bit of a catch up, you say what you're going to be working on, you give yourself 90 minutes to do that, you have some lunch, and then you say, cool, I'm going to do as much as I can in an hour, then I'm going to get going. You will often find that you do more, you're more productive than when you're at home. Oh, I'll just quickly stick some washing on. I've got to quickly go and pick up some eggs I forgot about, you know?
I totally agree. Honestly, I've gone working. So I love what you say about creativity, and I think it's so important. I have only recently really come into contact with myself about how lonely I feel sometimes because I've given myself space.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of us feel loneliness with work. And I think that I have been doing that. And so I've really noticed I need to nurture. And I've actually really built a very lovely new friendship like in the last year.
Cheating on me.
I'm cheating on you. But it's also someone who lives close by to me. But also I like doing things like going for little walks with like sometimes a school mom, or sometimes I know someone who lives close to me.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to really acknowledge that vulnerability and have enough space to actually notice that, because it's so easy to get stuck in, I'm just going to do all these chores in my house. But particularly for mothers who maybe work from home or are largely doing unpaid work at home, when you have that burst of activity in the morning and then suddenly you're by yourself.
Yes.
And I was going through a phase of actually phoning my husband and telling him how lonely I felt. And I was like, I really need to do something about this. I actually need to take, and I have taken action, but I think that I want to say to the listeners that there's no shame in this.
Oh
Like,
my goodness.
we go from
there
being
isn't.
like your auntie Amaneta, we kind of raised on that, like we're international business ladies in our 20s. And then we like, I don't know, COVID and motherhood, things change. So yes.
And also, Cath, thinking about creativity, my sister lives in Ghana.
Yeah.
There have been times where I've gone for a walk with my sister on video call.
Yeah.
And then I'll just sit in my local park. I think my local park is beautiful. It's nothing fancy. And I'm sitting in this environment that I find really beautiful, having a conversation with one of the most beautiful humans in my entire life.
Yeah.
So if you're like, and that's all right for you, but I can't nip into central London or wherever to go and co-walk, maybe it's not a video call, maybe it's a phone call. And part of your walk is having that phone call, having that point of connection whilst you're out also connecting with your environment. And I say part of it because it's really important for us to orient to our environment, because that is also a source of support. We think about our connection as only being with other human beings, but one of the things we're disconnected from when we are in our houses all the time, we're disconnected from nature, we're disconnected from the world. That can be really nourishing. I can tell you, Cath, there were points in time last year where I felt so isolated. Like, publishing a book is very, very challenging, even when you've got a massive team and you've got all of these things going on. And I'm not saying that I've got a massive team, because I do not. And I'm telling you, there were times going to the dairy farm and just observing the cows doing what they do. It was so nourishing. And sometimes it was humorous, because I can't remember when it was in the year I had to Google, because we would just see out of nowhere when I'd go with my daughter, these cows, just male cows jumping on female cows with like these massive erections. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. It's actually
mating season
for them. Yes, mating season. And so it was like I was connected to that experience. Whilst it was also humorous, I was like, oh, okay, this is how their world works. And their world is also part of my world. There were times when I was just standing still and I'd be like, oh my goodness, what is that? And there's an owl that just swoops out of nowhere, seeing a field mouse, and just grabs the field mouse for its lunch, or bumping into people I haven't seen for ages. Or even if it is just seeing another person on their walk and our eyes catch and we smile and greet each other.
Exactly.
Those micro connections also build up within us. We mustn't overlook them. But please, homework for everybody is to, if you are a working person and you work from home, is to reach out to somebody and find a place. It doesn't have to be a Santander cafe. It could be a local cafe in your neighborhood, because you're then going to put money in the hands of your local community. Go there, have a coffee. You don't have to, if you're like, well, money's tight, you don't have to have lunch. You can cuddle coffee and be with somebody and have a co-working experience. My friend Sarah, when we go co-working, sometimes I have a call and she'll use that time to go for a walk around the block to kind of like pep herself up rather than leaning on caffeine. So when we allow ourselves to be creative, we will see that the things we automatically assume are a hurdle are things that we can navigate our way around.
Absolutely. Thank you for your beautiful energy and your enthusiasm that you've brought for us here today. It's really, really wonderful.
You're very welcome. And Cath, I'm going to be messaging you so that we can have a Santander co-working date.
I love that. Now tell us, how can people work with you? How can they find you? I know you're Tamu Thomas on Instagram, and we'll have all this in the show notes, but tell us about your programs.
Well, my work has changed, because in redefining success and owning who and how I am now. First of all, Instagram is my friendship bench. So do come and find me there. I generally share a lot there. I've been a bit quiet there, but still, that is a place where you will find out about things. Also, my mailing list. If you go to my Instagram or my website, it will pop up and you can join my mailing list, where I am going to be writing a lot about redefining success. I think it's on the 10th of April, I'm launching my YouTube channel, which is also called Redefining Success, where I will be sharing episodes about that. Also my book. Do buy
And
my
tell us
book.
about your event,
Which event?
Redefining Success.
Oh, no, it's not going to be in that. So, under Redefining Success, I've got a whole load of things that are happening, and I'm planning an event in June.
Okay.
But join my mailing list or find me on Instagram, because you'll get details about that there. Because one of the things I am really like this year is all about collaboration and connection. And I love in-person events. And I want to dedicate, not even I want to, I am dedicating more time to in-person events, because it's so great when women get together.
It is.
I went to an event last week. I was hosting an event for Santander, and I introduced two women who, just like that, they were talking about their experience of endometriosis. And that's not something, that happens when you're just seeing each other online. So that's happening. And in terms of working with me, at the moment, my work is focused on service-based experts, people in corporate who do a lot of holding space for other people. I'm working with them to turn that expertise into thought leadership, so that they can add a thought leadership revenue stream to their work. So that's speaking engagements, forming relationships with journalists. So you're getting like media experiences, facilitating workshops and that kind of thing, so that you're leveraging your expertise rather than constantly having to serve lots and lots of people.
Yes.
You're going to serve lots of people simultaneously and get paid very handsomely for it very much. So that's what I'm focusing. I've got a program that's starting on the 22nd of April called the Maverick Incubator. If you want to hear more about that, sign up to my mailing list, because the information is going there first. And if you're interested in my book, it's available everywhere. And if you have got a Spotify subscription, you can listen to my book as part of your Spotify subscription, because Spotify now have their own audiobook library.
Wow. Do you get
Yep.
paid for that?
So if you pay for a Spotify subscription, you can listen to up to 15 hours worth of audiobooks.
Okay.
And my book is 7 hours something. So you can absolutely listen to that. I get the same amount of like royalty payments as you do when you buy my book. But I advocate for people buying a physical copy of the book, because so many people have told me they've got sticky tabs, they highlight bits that they go back to, and that's easier to go back to than a book. And also,
Much
to be
easier. And
quite
there's lots of
frank,
exercises.
audio. Say that
It's
again.
difficult to do any of it. There's so many exercises and journal prompts.
It's difficult to do that on
impossible to
audio.
do that on
Yeah,
an audiobook.
absolutely. And if you buy my book and you go to my website, you will be able to download the guided meditations that go in the book.
Oh, yes. Yes, I've done that. I should do that. Okay. This has been very, very, very joyful. Thank you for all of those details. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us.
Thank you.
And it's going to put a rocket under lots of people, So that's really wonderful, because together and forming connection, that's how we can shatter these frameworks,
Do you know what, Cath? I would even when we come together and we collaborate and we support each other and we recognize that unity doesn't mean we're all the same.
Yeah.
It means that we value our humanity. Rather than taking our energy to shatter, we are so focused on what we're doing, we're no longer holding up those systems, and they will begin to crumble. That is why, particularly in America, there is so much stuff happening to try and provoke a reaction, because what they're seeing is people like, no, I'm walking away from that, and it is crumbling all on its own.
Yes.
So it's a bit like, I remember the Bible story about the wall of Jericho, where they had to walk around the walls of Jericho like loads and loads of times. And then on the last day, they had to make noise and bang, and then the walls just collapsed. It's a similar type of vibe. Like, we don't need to use our precious energy to shatter anything. Let us direct our precious energy to forming meaningful connections, so those transactional experiences will just rot and decay.
That's true. You're so wise. And you said that at your book launch, why waste our energy focusing on burning this down? We can just turn over here and create something. Yeah. I have to keep on remembering that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cassie.
Thank you.